Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's SIG Autoscaling weekly community call. SIG Autoscaling is part of the Kubernetes project and the CNCF, and as such, we abide by the code of conduct, which boils down to please be respectful, kind, and curious. We welcome all voices, and without further ado, we do have an agenda today, which is great. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for folks. Can I do that? I'm confident I can do that. Omer, if you are, I see that right there. You want to kick it off?
Yeah,
We've
sure.
got two agenda items.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many VPA people are here, but I see a lot of people, I mean, not a lot, but some people are asking for a Helm chart for the VPA. So I thought maybe I can bring it up and maybe we should discuss it. Maybe we need to do it, maybe not. We discussed it, I don't know, something like last year, a year ago, something like that, and we decided not to do it. Maybe it's time to rethink it. So I'm curious what people think. And the other things is that I have an API question, something that we want to get some of the controller settings, globally controller setting to a VPA object setting, like OOM bump up ratio and such. And Majik has asked a couple of good questions, so if people can take a look at this and share their opinion, it would be nice.
Okay, cool. Let's do one thing at a time here. I'll click through to this discussion link about the Helm chart.
It's a different discussion. It's just mentioned in the Helm chart.
Oh, I
Uh,
see. Okay, got it.
yeah, because
So
it's
yeah,
the
so
first.
to
Sorry.
the folks here, does anybody here have any thoughts on this? There's not a ton of folks here today.
So in general, I think the answer is yes. I think we should have a Helm chart. Um, my concern is enough maintainers right now for a Helm chart.
Yeah.
Because we don't have many VPA maintainers. However, in the issue tracker somewhere, I think there's two issues that say, hey, we want a Helm chart. And I think somebody was willing to like donate their Helm chart to the SIG or something. So it's possible that we could, if we wanted to do this, we could potentially get a Helm chart and maintainers at the same time. I just don't know if they're, first of all, still interested and want to do that. And also how to do that if that is the case. So I think the general answer for me is this would be great, but it's not something I could put time onto today.
Okay, that all sounds fair. I think I can speak from the cluster autoscaler experience perspective. This will be a little easier for VPA, I would imagine, but the challenge is that you're going to go through times where you're going to have a Helm chart that's not entirely representative of all of the possible use cases. Maybe again, maybe VPA, the possible use cases are finite enough that you can maintain that. But in cluster autoscaler, you can imagine with all the providers and all the combinatorics, the set of features in the Helm chart that's official right now are essentially the set of features that folks have chosen to scaffold and maintain over the past several years. But I think it is beneficial for the project to have a Helm chart. So all this is to say, if there's an opportunity, we can do the perfect isn't the enemy, or good is not the enemy of perfect, or whatever the expression is. And I think have a high probability that we're going to be offering something of value to users. So yeah, just if you're watching the recording, let it be stated that if you want to work on a Helm chart, the current VPA maintainers welcome that effort.
Maybe I can open an issue about it so people can see.
Yeah, and I can
Maybe it's
certainly pitch
worth
in with just like making sure the Helm charts at a bare minimum level quality, and I'm sure other folks can do that as well.
maybe it's worth commenting. So we have two other Helm chart issues from 2020 and 2022 with 45 comments on the one and 17 on the other. Maybe it's worth looking through those because I'm pretty sure somebody did offer to like donate their Helm chart. But maybe just messaging on those issues, we can get people who might also contribute, or at least get a base or a something to start off with.
Yeah, I think let me just quickly, you can watch me live. I think that the existing CI, which includes not only cutting versions of Helm charts, but also um, publishes a repo, which is important,
Yes, there is a
and
repo here.
can be reused so that we can just add a VPA start here, and I would expect that would reuse the same repo and all that goodness.
I think so, yeah. What is, just scroll down a bit. Are the instructions to install the cluster autoscaler one here? No, try in the cluster autoscaler directory.
Yeah.
Just the normal like run this Helm thing to
So
install.
we're using
Uh,
I think a standard GitHub action which
ah,
uses the GitHub pages
yeah. Okay, but it's
feature to
it's
publish Helm charts.
Kubernetes. It's kubernetes.io/autoscaler, not cluster autoscaler or something like that. It's a reusable
Correct.
URL. Perfect.
That's
Cool.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a bunch of foundational work that we can lean on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. TLDR Helm chart, welcome. Okay, so Omer, you want to, I'll click through this, and if you want to recontextualize this and see if you can get any thoughts here.
Yeah, basically the VPA is global config values that are that are all data for the entire VPA's objects. I mean, it's per controller settings, and we decided that we want to move those settings into a VPA object. For example, you can set the VPA commander with an OOM mean bump up and mean bump up ratio, and then the entire VPAs will select this bump up ratio and behave accordingly. So we wanted to move those settings to per VPA object. And then I got the following review, and the number 3 here on the review would be awesome if people can two, sorry, number 2 would be awesome if people just read it and share their thought on this.
Yeah, I still need to read this. The only thing I can think of is we currently, I think, have an existing pattern about being able to control a VPA for per the pod and per container, I think. So my assumption is we should just follow that pattern. But I can't actually remember exactly I can't actually remember exactly what the AEP says. I can't remember what you stated in here.
I said that it will be per VPA,
Okay.
but maybe I was wrong there, and we should do it per container. Maybe I was not wrong. I mean,
What does the global one do? Is that per container?
the
I
global
mean,
one, the global is per controller. I mean,
but does it, when it does the bump up, does it bump up? I guess it bumps up the pod, not the container.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
a good
maybe just
point.
an exercise at a minimum to go through the, provide an explanation of each. So there's 3 possible paths here. Just the standard design doc homework of describing what those 3 paths might look like. And Omer, it looks like you're the author of this. So if
Yeah.
in the process of doing that, you find yourself actually reconsidering setting it at the VPA level, then other than that, that might be sufficient. That's how I interpret this comment primarily, is just, have we thought about this from other angles? So
Yeah.
if we haven't, I think just going through that exercise would
Yeah.
probably satisfy that, and would probably help yourself build more confidence about.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, cool. Any more thoughts on that? All right. Thank you for taking notes. I'm gonna accuse you, Mike, of doing that, but if I'm wrong, thank you to whomever's taking notes. Okay, cool, Mike. The floor is yours about the autoscaler issue that you discussed. You brought up last week.
Yeah. So just as a quick refresher, there is, code in the autoscaler that when it is attempting to make a node, template or attempting to make node information that it can put into the simulator, there is a section of logic that should first try to find a node from the node group and use that if possible. And then if that's not available, it falls through to making a node template, which is it asks the cloud provider to do that. And then the last clause that says like, okay, if we can't use either of those, let's try to use a node that was previously marked as unschedulable, right? It would be otherwise ready. It's not in deleting, but it's been marked as unschedulable or has a no schedule taint on it or something. Could we use that last node as like as a last option? And I looked through the history of the code here, and that clause goes all the way back to the 1.0 release of the cluster autoscaler. So theoretically, the intention was that when searching for possible nodes to use as templates, that there was this notion that we would have a fall through in the worst case scenario. But going back to the 1.0 release as well, we've always pruned nodes that would have been able to pass that check before they even go into the algorithm, right? So it's like this was never going to work from 1.0 on. Maybe it worked in the prehistory times. I don't know. So I'm not really sure what the intention here is, but I created a patch to basically into the process functions. We pass in all the ready nodes into this processing function. So I created a patch that also can pass in the ready unschedulable nodes as like a second option, right? And I tried to do that just because I wanted to really try and limit the amount of extra information that we were passing in there. Like I didn't want to pass in the list of all nodes or whatever. I just wanted to try and really tightly focus it. The good news is it does seem to be working. It seems to solve this problem. And it also is passing the rest of like the continuous integration tests that we run at Red Hat. So like it's not a matrix of every single feature that the cluster autoscaler has, but like scaling up, scaling down, balancing nodes, scaling to from zero, all these kind of things, kind of the basic operations you would expect. So it seems to be working well. I'm not especially happy with this patch because it is kind of hacky, but I've tried to make it as good as possible. I'm working on the unit test stuff now. Um, so I just wanted to kind of talk about that and see like, maybe I should just post the PR and we could discuss it there and see if it makes sense or if there's a better way to go about this or like if we even think this behavior should be part of the cluster autoscaler. Like I'm not sure at this point. So just kind of looking for other opinions from the community, I guess. And if
Sorry, I
nobody,
won't. I can't watch. I can never figure out raise hands while I'm screen sharing. I was gonna try to do the polite thing, but I'm just gonna talk because I can't find it. Thank you so much, Mike. Remind us that this came up as a result of a user sort of naively thinking, why wouldn't the cluster autoscaler use this ready node, which happens to be unschedulable for orthogonal reasons, as a template for a new node that I actually need? Like I've got pending pods and I've got a node that should be um, a candidate for using as a template. Why isn't that happening? Is
yeah.
that correct? So you actually have a user who wants this behavior,
Well, no, like
even without reading the code. Oh no, okay,
right.
go
Our
ahead.
user didn't ask for this behavior specifically, but here's the situation they see, right? I've got an otherwise healthy cluster and I'm performing some maintenance. So I decide to mark a bunch of nodes as not schedulable and taint them, right? At the same time, I still have workloads that are going on in my cluster. And I noticed that one of my pods has been not scheduled for like 30 minutes, right? And it otherwise would fit onto this node that I've marked as unschedulable. But the cluster autoscaler is not making a new node that should be like a replica of that one that
Yeah.
the workload would land on. And so the question is, why is the autoscaler not doing that, right? that caused this investigation to kind of uncover, like, if you look at the code, you would expect that the autoscaler would still be able to
Yeah.
work in this situation, but it obviously doesn't, right? So it's not that the user we have was looking for this behavior. They're wondering, why aren't these workloads scheduling in an otherwise healthy cluster, you know?
Yeah. Cool. I think putting this into the PRQ and having us evaluate it is probably the most sensible thing. I think the way that it was originally implemented with this being a fallback makes sense. You could, I think there is an argument on both sides why you might not or want to consider unschedulable nodes as candidates for, predictive node simulation. But if it's like a last case scenario fallback, I feel like the, that's a pretty strong case for inclusion. It's not, I think it makes sense that in the original list of nodes to consider, you would deprioritize those because there's a non-zero chance that those things are unschedulable in a durable way, as in
Right.
you bring a new node online and it's going to be unschedulable.
Right,
But
right. Like,
as a point of last resort, it does seem like a sensible option. And
yeah,
we
I mean,
can be sensitive if after releasing this, let's say months from now, we get reports from users that their cluster is crashing, adding nodes, deleting nodes that are unschedulable, we could maybe reconsider. I see that as a low probability outcome, and it's more likely that we are going to solve for that last bit of the asymptote.
right. And like, I think what the downside to this, right, would be that, like, what the autoscaler doesn't know is that it sees a node that's ready otherwise, but maybe has an unschedulable taint on it, or maybe it's set as unschedulable, right? The autoscaler doesn't know, if I make another one of these, is it just going to come up in an unschedulable state? And so I think that's why this is like a last case scenario. It's like, okay, well, I'll
Yeah.
try to make another one of these. So the worst thing that would happen, and this would be bad probably for some users, is that the autoscaler would keep making nodes and they would keep being unschedulable until it filled the size of that node group. And now someone could potentially be paying for nodes that aren't doing anything, right? But
Yeah.
in that case, you probably should have turned that node group off anyways. But I don't want to, that's not an argument to be made. It's just, this is what a user is going to see if this goes poorly for them.
Yeah. And then I think just from a code perspective, it's fair. The most likely way to describe what you've uncovered, Mike, is that there's a bug. And so you're fixing a bug.
Right.
It seems that the filtering out of the unschedulable nodes from the set, the set for consideration is happening at the wrong time. It seems fair to just describe that as a bug. And absent having the engineers who actually implemented that to clarify, that seems like a sensible path forward is to address that bug and to, in some way, we can discuss the actual implementation in the PR thread to fix the order of filtering or change the filter criteria before it gets to the function which has that fallback execution.
Yeah. It's just like I was really expecting that it worked at some point in history. So like the shocking thing to me was to see that, obviously there was the intentionality for this thing to work, but it was never going to work.
Yeah. Well, let it be known that bugs are there at the 1.0 release in the software. It's been documented here. It's possible.
Right. I should have put since one done. Okay, anyways, yeah, thanks. I'll put up a PR once I get the unit test working and we can kind of go from there.
Okay, cool. And I'm looking to see if anybody raises hands. I don't mean this just to be a conversation between Mike and myself, but I don't see any. So okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so,
And looks like you've got one more, Mike, before we
yes.
get to Adrian.
So there is another bug that I'm working on that pretty much only affects the cluster API provider, but it is also a very nasty bug because the cluster autoscaler can delete the wrong nodes during a scale down. So that is not something
That doesn't sound great.
No, it doesn't. And this is all related to the way that a machine deployment in the cluster API, parlance, or in that API, a machine deployment can handle a rolling update of instances that are underneath it, of nodes that are underneath it. And so when a machine deployment is undergoing an upgrade, and the cluster autoscaler is also trying to manipulate the replica count, very bad things can happen, because when the machine deployment starts an upgrade, what it actually does is it creates like a second machine set, and it starts to create new nodes in parallel. But the replica count on the machine deployment does not reflect the total number of nodes. So there are extra nodes in the system for some amount of time. And if those nodes persist longer than the unneeded time, or are not, longer than the unready time, or are empty for long enough, then the autoscaler says, okay, I've got this node, I want to delete it. What node group is it part of? Delete this node from this node group. And Cluster API then reduces the replica count on the machine deployment, but because the replica count does not reflect the actual state of the world, what ends up happening is the machine deployment controller deletes the wrong node. I've talked with the cluster API maintainers about this pretty extensively, and there are some weird behaviors in the machine deployment controller that make this even worse sometimes. And new nodes can get deleted, old nodes can get deleted. It all depends on the scenario in the cluster. So if you scroll down a little bit on this, Jack, we've had, there's some diagrams in there that are going to show how it works. But scroll up to Stefan's comment, second to last. Stefan and Fabrizio from the Cluster API community have been doing some cool debugging. And one of the things that they found, we still need to talk through some of this, is like, the two options that I'm here to kind of talk about today are like in the part where autoscaler should not taint and cordon the node. This must have, like, having the ability to turn off the to be deleted by cluster autoscaler taint is something that would be advantageous to cluster API, because well, let me talk about the next point. I'll come back to that. Also, it would be nice to be able to have a flag to turn off draining by the cluster autoscaler. And the reason I say this is because, historically, the cluster autoscaler has been written for specific infrastructures, right? And it would interact directly with the infrastructure to do things. More recently, we've had providers like EKS and AKS where cluster autoscaler is actually integrating with a Kubernetes service. It's not necessarily integrating directly with the infrastructure. Now, in the case of AKS and EKS, it is. But cluster API appears more like it's integrating with a Kubernetes service than it is with an infrastructure, right? And we're starting to get dual responsibilities here, where the cluster API components, independently on their own, have taken it upon themselves to do cordoning, draining, handling everything that goes around updating a node. And so now it would be advantageous to be able to run the cluster autoscaler in a way where we say, look, all I want you to do is manage scaling up and scaling down. I don't want you to try to cordon things. I don't want you to try to drain things. I don't want you to put taints on my nodes. I just want you to kind of manipulate the node groups, and that's it. So what I would like to propose is a couple of flags that would allow us to run the cluster autoscaler in a way where it's not draining, it's not adding these taints to nodes, and it's just manipulating the node groups. I realize we're running short on time, but that's kind of the TLDR.
Okay, can I ask some clarifying questions? Did anybody else have any questions? Okay, great. So the main reason, I totally understand this makes sense. Like in a way, we need, when you have multiple actors who are cooperatively sharing the authority for making updates in a node pool, you need things like exclusive locks on certain key actions so that only one actor at a time can actually be responsible for that. So this I think is not controversial at all. Is the reason to entirely restrict the cluster autoscaler runtime from any sort of graceful shutdown actions, because we expect those graceful actions to happen as soon as cluster autoscaler updates the replica count? So if I update the replica count from 10 to 9 in a cluster API, or as you say, in a managed Kubernetes scenario, is the expectation that that managed service, that managed provider, is going to handle that decrement in a graceful way automatically on my behalf? And so I don't have to do the full transaction. I can simply defer to the provider to do the decrement in the sort of right way that the customer expects.
Right.
Is that the general idea?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if I would say the expectation, but yeah, we need, what we would like is the option to say, okay, yeah, on this platform, the expectation is that I'm doing all the draining and cordoning. I don't want cluster autoscaler to do it. I'm going to manage it on my own. Like my service knows a lot about Kubernetes. I don't need the cluster autoscaler to manage these transactions. I just need it to manage the scaling portion.
It's so one thing that's I'm slightly curious about is coordinate draining is idempotent, and as far as I can tell, there's nothing harmful about doing it an extra like doing an extra coordinate or an extra drain on a node pool.
I mean, I'll have to, that's a question I'll have to kind of like chat with Stefan a little bit more about, because this is what he observed while running some of these tests. And it seemed like having the autoscaler not do the draining, not the cordoning, but just the draining, or I guess not the cordoning or the draining, it seemed to improve the stability of it, I think. Now, I'm not
That's
sure what the
interesting.
competition there was, but I'll follow up on that.
Okay, cool. But yeah, that makes sense. I would say so the proposition here is okay. We could probably
The pro
discuss this in an offline, but
Yeah.
this
Basically add two new flag. The main thing, the cluster API stuff probably doesn't matter to anybody outside the cluster API provider. But the main thing for the core part of the autoscaler is, I think we'd like to introduce two flags. One that would allow us to disable the to be deleted by cluster autoscaler taint, and another that would be able to disable draining. And I'm doing
I see.
research now to kind of figure out how badly that will affect other parts of the autoscaler.
Well, but this one is just literally at a short circuit that during certain operational scenarios, if your cluster autoscaler for a particular node pool is configured for scale down, you would just skip that.
Right.
If,
Right.
for
You would just
example,
not
you
do the
notice, let's say that there's a standard paint that gets applied to any one node in a node pool, which is I think that would happen during a cluster API machine deployment update is
right.
let's say a canonical rolling upgrade configuration of one at a time. So at a bare minimum, you're always going during a machine deployment rollout, you're going to have at least one node in that pool with some evidence that a rollout is occurring. And when Cluster Autoscaler observes that during its scale down run loop, it can just short circuit immediately and just
Right. That
not
would just
scale down.
happen. That would just happen inside the cluster API provider. Like in the delete nodes, when we look to see like, okay, is the nodes that are being deleted, is that node part of a machine deployment that's undergoing an upgrade? If so, just don't do the delete node. Just let it pass by or whatever. But
Okay,
I'm
cool.
not even sure that's the correct thing yet. Like I think there's more that needs to be discussed there because what if your upgrade goes on for like days and days and days, right? Now you're saying you can never scale down that node group. You can never have the autoscaler scale down that node group during something that might take you several days to upgrade. Like I'm not sure how that's going to survive, but maybe we need to do it that way.
Yeah, cool. And if you could clarify why this is so important, I would be curious because I would think that they should be able to do that cooperatively.
Yeah, I think it has to do with like the ordering of how the cluster autoscaler is doing these things, how it's like tainting the node first and then going into a cordon and drain situation, while at the same time, like the cluster API controllers are trying to do something very similar. So there's a lot of like competition for updating the node object and everything. But yeah, I'll follow up and ask a little more about that one.
Okay, cool.
And apologies for eating up all the time here.
Zoom has the old Joel. I know we're a couple minutes over, but
Yeah, I just noticed when I
I'd
joined
be happy
that,
to fix that.
yeah, the Zoom meeting was just saying, oh yeah, the meeting isn't till Monday. So if anybody's joining at the old time, it'd be nice if Zoom showed them, oh, here's the new time. So
I see. So this is in the Zoom meeting object itself.
yeah, I assume I don't really know Zoom very well. So I assume
Cool.
Zoom knows about the meeting, so it just needs to probably have the time updated.
Cool. We'll get top people on that and fix that right away. I appreciate you raising that. That definitely sounds confusing. And I rely on those kinds of things to help my brain, which is going to take a while to internalize the new time. Okay, cool. I'll just make one quick comment about 134 release of Cluster Autoscaler. And maybe I'll pass over to Adrian and Omer to talk about VPA, any VPA updates post 134. Kuba has been on an extended leave. I think he returns in mid-September. I'm getting ready to go on a couple weeks of vacation, although I actually will be here. I think I'll be here the next couple of meetings, but they'll be super short weeks for me. So I don't expect that we'll have a release for a couple of weeks. And I'll use the excuse that I haven't, or that the maintainers haven't published any official updated release guidance to say that we didn't do anything wrong. But I expect by the next 135 release, we'll actually have a process, and we'll execute that process. So if the process says release, the week of the Kubernetes minor release, then we'll do that for 135. But I'm trying to pay attention to chatter. I don't see a ton of like urgent need, so I think we're okay. But let me know if I'm wrong, and we can figure something out. Adrian and Omer, any interesting things about VPA release post 134?
We were waiting for 1.4.0 to be released. 1.5.0. We're waiting for the next minor release. I forgot the person's name. Louise is working on that. I mentioned it last week in the call, but I think they've been focusing on a patch release for us.
Yeah, so I was actually helping with him for 142, and I think so that's out.
Yeah, so now we're waiting on 150.
I see. So we've got a community member that's going to take care of that.
Yeah, he said he's out, so I don't really know when it's going to happen or who else can do it. But it would kind of be nice to get sooner rather than later, because we want feedback for the SIG node people for the in-place resize work.
Right. Okay. Cool. Let me know on Slack if I can help. Oh, did I skip your item? I definitely did want to do that. I'm sorry.
It's small.
No.
There's a KEP that is 5 years old that I'm attempting to try and push across the line. So, Jack, you've already reviewed it, but looking for approvals and that kind of stuff to get it moving.
Yeah, this is I think this would be great for the community. So thank you for reviving this.
Cool.
And I saw comments from Jordan and folks, so it does look like API reviewers are paying attention to this. So that's great.
Yeah, I asked Maciek about it, and we still need tech lead approval from SIG Autoscaling. So
Cool.
I'm going to be a squeaky wheel and to try and
That's
get this
exactly what you should be.
through.
Yeah, great.
Okay, cool. I apologize in advance.
Happy to see this going forward too. Like I think this has been so long in there that like even I reviewed it at one point. Like, it's definitely past its time.
I pinged John Bellamaric and I said, "Are you still want to be a reviewer for this? Because you were tagged 5 years ago." But he gave me a thumbs up. So, all right, yeah. Thanks for reminding me that I skipped over this.
No, don't worry about it. I'll mention it every week until it's merged.
Great.
Aiming for 135. That would be really great because we missed 134 already because we didn't have approval. So I'm trying to see if we can get 135. And the proposal I think is pretty solid.
Are you going to implement it, Adrian?
No, I think
Johan will.
Johannes?
Johannes.
Yeah, Johannes. He plans to do it. I was going to pick it up and he went silent for a bit, but he's come back. He's keen to do it. He's not willing to push it up the hill though. So I'm attempting to move it.
All right. Be September 4th, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.